Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, happy Thursday, almost to the weekend. I hope you're having a good one so far. I want to apologize for not getting part 2 of this out last night, but I tried 3 times and my internet was like, yeah, I think I'll just take a nap. So I didn't, I finally just gave up, y'all. I would get 20 minutes in and it would just hang up. And at that point, it was 10 o'clock and I was done. So we're going to get this in today. I also have a couple of little tidbits from the morning session before break today. Angela is still on cross-exam. But want to make a couple of things first. Correction about the smudge. Yesterday on part 1, I talked about how George, Jake, and Billy went to go give the footwear impressions at BCI once they had moved back to Ohio from Alaska. And I said that George said he was going to smudge his footprint when they took the impression, but I got a little confused with the notes. And this is one of the things that's hard about when people opt out is sometimes like yesterday, I did this early episode without really clarifying with Eric what was said. And he told me that what actually happened is that whenever it broke, I'm assuming on the news, that there was a bloody footprint found at one of the crime scenes. George told Angela it was his footprint. So a lot of people were like, how would he know where it was or that he left it and not Jake and, all this stuff. But according to Angela, George said he saw the bloody footprint in one of the residences as they were leaving and told Billy he needed to go back and smudge that footprint. Billy told him not to worry about it. Let's go. That's where the smudge came in. I just wanted to clarify. It's a little hard when people opt out to sometimes put together the notes in a way that makes sense to me. And yesterday was one of those things that I got mixed up. So thanks to Eric and Jamie, both, by the way, Big E and Jamie, who are our eyes and ears in the courtroom since we can't have eyes and ears in there. They take furious notes. I tell you what, I don't know how their hands are not just, at the point where they can't move. I'm talking 10, 11, 12 pages each every day. So big shout out to them. We wouldn't be able to do this without them. All right. Also, big thank you to Lori for the very generous donation. Also, Lucia, Missy, Valerie, Kimberly, Kitty, Janet, Tara, Marion, Donna, Nick, Mick, Dan, Hey Now, Kentucky, Jennifer, and Carolyn. Thank you all for the donations. I really appreciate it. It helps me to be able to do what I do. And people don't realize there are bills associated with putting on a podcast. You have to pay for the hosting of the podcast. You have to pay for your software to record video, Adobe, extra internet in here. So it helps me to offset the cost. So thank you so much. The plan for today is for me to at least get part 1 out of her testimony. I kind of think maybe she'll finish up today, and I'm hoping before I leave for the beach because I have to go down until Saturday to do some things at the house. And it was going to be me and my mom. Now I got like my 3 kids and one of my daughter's friends who's staying here while her parents are out of the country. So we're just going to live once, pack it up, let them play hooky tomorrow and go, make some fun in a day and a half. So tomorrow I plan to do some YouTube shorts to keep you guys updated on what's going on in the courtroom. If I were to miss part 2 tonight, I won't have great audio, but I will try to do a few YouTube shorts of anything that's really, really good. And then Saturday, I should get home fairly early. So I plan to summarize whatever I missed between this afternoon and tomorrow. But if you haven't subscribed to YouTube, go hit the subscribe button and the little bell. It will update you every time I upload something. YouTube shorts are great for just little 2-minute, 1-minute, 2-minute clips where I don't have time to do a full episode or it's just, I don't have enough to do a full episode. So keep an eye there. I'll keep you updated as best I can. Let's get into the testimony. One thing last night when I'm laying in the bed, like feeling like a pioneer, because I watch YouTube to go to sleep. I'm a big hippie. So I put on like healing tones or, like some kind of earth sounds and I fall asleep. But of course, I didn't have internet. I can't do it on my phone. It's just too small and I have to hold it. And so I was laying there, just feeling like I was living, in the way back when, because I didn't have my YouTube. But I was thinking about the way the prosecution's put on this case. And, we're way into this now. Today is actually my little header down there at the bottom is wrong. Sorry about that. But, today's day 36. And I was thinking, if you go back, I know there was a lot of criticism in the beginning about how this case was being put forward, but I think doing it in chronological order has been really helpful for the people that may not know much about this case. So I have to give a shout out to the prosecution, honestly, y'all, because I know that I've been a little bit critical, but at the end of the day, they're going to get their conviction and these people are going to go away. And you might hear about them when there's some documentary, like 3 years down the road about this case. 2 confessions, most likely a finding of guilty in this case for something. Another thing, people are a little confused about how George is charged with the actual murders when he didn't pull the trigger. He was part of the conspiracy. So when you're part of the conspiracy and you're charged with that, you don't need to pull the trigger to be charged with murder. So, all right, let's get into it. Yesterday, after lunch, Jake was upset and not concentrating, not acting normal. Angela expressed regret for involving Jake and George in the homicides. She told Billy this. She did not say she regretted the homicides. That maybe would have been the whole more appropriate way to go, but hey. When asked why she regretted it, Angela said, because they're my sons. She starts to get really emotional on the stand, starts crying. And she said, I should have protected them. We wouldn't be here now. And she talks about taking Beth to Walmart in Jackson, Ohio. Remember, Beth wanted to leave, was going to Nashville. I think at this point, they were ready for her to be gone. They had much more heavier things on their plate to deal with. Angela said she's not sure exactly when she took her, but she knows that Beth lived with them for about 3 months in Ohio. And Angela said at this point, she was worried the family was going to get arrested. So you see with Tabitha and Hannah Mae, there was more of a fight to kind of keep them there. But I think at this point, I think they knew the walls were closing in. I think maybe Angela saw Beth as a little bit of a risk in that house. And so they took her. The prosecution asked if they made plans in the event the family was arrested, who would get the kids. And she said the plan was, which she said we always have backup plans, is that Frederica and Robin, which is Billy's mom and sister, would take Vine and Suds. And I just have to say, Suds is such a cute little nickname, y'all. I love saying it. George made threats to law enforcement back in 2018. Angela said he didn't say he would kill them, but she said he was upset. Then get this. She says Billy really should have never been a father. This was something Nash sort of insinuated, and she agreed. She said that Billy taught George and Jake how to commit crime, steal, and to survive. And he also taught her things as well. She said Billy wasn't necessarily harder on one of the boys as opposed to the other. It was kind of 50-50. So one day Jake would kind of be the favorite and George would be the target and vice versa. She did admit that Billy did choke George once, I believe in a truck is what the note said. Jake always spoke his mind. She said that was just how Jake was. On the other hand, George was always hesitant to hurt anybody's feelings, except for when he's going to bring all hell with him. So back to when she saw the alert about Jake pleading guilty. She saw him on TV and he was in the courtroom. This was a clip that was being played on the news. She said it made her feel upset and lost and like her heart had been ripped out. She didn't know anybody in the family at that point was talking to the state. And she ultimately decided in the fall of last year that she would go ahead and plead guilty as well. She doesn't know what Jake admitted to. And she talked to the state for 3 or 4 hours, agreed to 30 years in prison with no judicial relief to testify against George and Billy. She says she understands there's no early release for her, and she will be over 80 years old when she gets out. She's 52 now, so 82. She said one of the reasons that she made that plea deal as well is because before she passes away, she would love to see her sons and Vine and Suds and give them a hug one more time before she dies. She didn't mention Billy, though. I don't think, unless it wasn't written down. But yeah, so prosecutor Angela Canepa hands her the plea deal she made and has her read it. She asked her to repeat who was complicit in the charges and in the murders, and she said Jake, George, and Billy. She said the state didn't tell her what to say in her proffer, and her attorneys just reiterated to her it was very important to be truthful when she was confessing. She said Chris Newcomb, her half-brother, was upset she confessed. In a letter that she sent Frederica last year from jail after she had pled guilty, she said she couldn't understand why she was being charged with the weapons and robbery charges. And so that comes in a little later on cross. She is asked if she loves George, and she says yes, she does. When asked if she thought George loved her, she said she hoped so, and she was crying at this point. She regrets involving him in the murders, and Prosecutor Canepa asked how hard it's been for her to testify, and she said extremely hard. So again, I do think that for weeks we've been kind of saying, where is this ironclad evidence against George? And I really do think that Jake and Angela serve that purpose to the state, in that you have a mother on the stand who is admitted to being overbearing. This is a cult, essentially. These people are just, it seems like they all should be connected at the head and walk around, just as one. She's testifying against her son and placing him in the conspiracy at the crime scenes and then covering it up. So, say what you will about the state, but I think mission accomplished. I don't know, jury-wise, will they go for the 8 murders? Will they go, is it going to be something kind of lesser? I don't know, but I think the state ended, and I kind of think maybe the wiretaps are coming up after this, but I do think that the state has ended this pretty powerfully, and also putting a couple of witnesses in between Jake and Angela to let the jury digest what they heard from Jake, give them a little palate cleanser, and then you bring Angela on who drives it home. And I do think that at times she tried to build George up in the eyes of the jury, and that's probably just because she's trying to counteract what she had to testify to. Just my 2 cents. Like I say, I always look at things like a juror. I'm not a lawyer. I screw up law sometimes on here, but I do look at things as if I were sitting in that seat. So on cross, and I think that Nash and Parker have done a fantastic job crossing Jake and Angela. They have coaxed some more information out of them that wasn't brought out on direct. So Nash made her read that letter that she wrote to Frederica Wagner out loud in front of the court. He asked her why she signed the plea deal when she didn't understand it. And why didn't you ask the judge about it? In other words, you signed something you didn't understand. She said her attorney explained it to her later, and she does understand now why she was charged with the weapons and the robbery charges. In the letter, she tells Frederica that one of the reasons she pled was that so Jake wouldn't have to testify against her. Eric said he couldn't write fast enough during the reading of this letter. It was pretty fast. I'm hoping somebody can get that exhibit and we can put it out there. But Nash asks her if she was saying what she had to do for a lighter sentence or to avoid the death penalty being on the stand. And Angela said she was being truthful on the stand, and she was truthful when she confessed. At one point, she mentions that Billy took methamphetamines, which, doesn't surprise me. Nash said, you pulled your mom into an 8-person homicide case, and Angela said yes. He asked if she asked her mom to commit perjury to a grand jury, and Angela says no. She said she knew the term of the plea agreement before anyone pled guilty was that Rita would have to testify against her since Rita pled guilty. Nash said, that didn't make you plead guilty. You waited until Jake did. So he was really trying to point out that she still, at this point, was not worried about her mom or the repercussions that Rita would have had by Angela convincing her to lie to the court. And I thought that was it's not a huge point, but it's small. It shows her thought process. But Jake, I'm going to get up there and protect him. He asked what she'll get as part of her plea deal. She says 30 years. He said, the only reason you pled guilty, so Jake wouldn't have to testify against you. And she said, having Jake not testify was one reason, but not the only reason and not the main reason she took the deal. She said if she had pled guilty, it would have been the other way around for her, and she would have had to have testified against Jake and George and Billy. She said there were a lot of reasons, and he says the fact that your mom was going to have to testify against you just didn't compel you to plead guilty, and she really didn't say, from what I understand. He asks when she was arrested and where she was. She was at home in her dad's old house where she grew up. She lived there with her mom and dad when she was a kid, moved out at the age of 17, and she had graduated high school, had a job, and also had a scholarship for college. She said her dad was mentally and physically abusive to both her and her mother, and she ran away when she was 15 due to that. Her dad found out that she had had sex before marriage. This was after she graduated high school, and what happened was she had kind of told her mom in confidence. Her mom told her dad. So her dad suggested she join the military to get her life straight. So she enlisted in the Air Force. She was in for just over a year. Nash does bring up the fact that she was sexually assaulted twice, and that was the reason she left. Law enforcement wasn't involved in either one of those alleged sexual assaults. And when she moved back to Ohio, she met back up with Billy and they started dating. She knew him from before she left Ohio. Her parents had done business with the farm. As we know, eventually they got married. And so Nash moves on to talk about the arsons. We've kind of been through all this. I'm not going to regurgitate. Essentially, she admits to all of it at this point. Voila. But Nash tried to say they built that second house by stealing lumber. Angela says they didn't. She said they had about $20,000 in that house or something. But if you remember, Jake testified that they stole most of the property, or most of the building materials to build that second house. So one of them is misremembering. So they go through all the arsons. Eric said they both got confused about which property and what was burnt because, unfortunately, there's a lot of arson with these kids and their parents. So then they move on to talking about homeschooling Jake and George. Nash asked if there was a conflict that rung a bell with some teachers to her, and she really minimized it, didn't really get to the bottom of it from what I could tell. She said George was doing some kind of reading on a computer and asked the teacher for help. And she told George to figure it out. Angela said she got mad because she thought the teacher could have at least helped him sound it out. When it came to Jake, he was on a field trip with his class, and they were getting McDonald's Happy Meals with chicken nuggets as their lunch. And Angela said her kids did not eat that. So she didn't want Jake eating it. So she gave Jake money for what she said was a real chicken sandwich. And the teacher said Jake couldn't eat that if the entire class couldn't. And so those were the two examples of some conflict with teachers. So he asked who the teacher was when they homeschooled. Like, who did you designate? Do you have to tell them this person is going to be responsible for their schooling? And she said she didn't think they had to designate a parent, but this is scary. She said her and Billy taught the boys. Nash asked who was the official teacher, and she just said, I don't think we had to have one. I think you do. Nash talks about Jake and George being close to her brother Chris, her half-brother Chris, their whole life. She also said Billy was gone a lot. He didn't play favorites with the boys. They did discuss Billy choking George in the truck. And at one point, Nash mentioned something apparently about her side of the family favoring Jake more than George, but it seemed like, according to the note, she denied that. And then Nash talks about the boys having their own four-wheelers. Apparently, there was a time where Jake damaged George's four-wheeler, and I don't know. They were kind of it was kind of a line of questioning where they're giving examples of Jake being the favorite. So I'm really not sure if they were insinuating that like George had to give him his four-wheeler because Jake had messed up his. I'm not super sure. So Nash, this was interesting. He brings up in the past that Angela and Billy watched a child while their mom got situated. The baby's name was Jordan. And this kid would stay, I think it was more baby. She would stay a couple of weeks at a time. And once the mom was able to get on her feet and in a position to take the baby home, Angela apparently didn't want to give this kid back. Angela was told if she didn't get the baby back to her mom, the police or children's services would get involved. And Angela denied it, but Nash asked if she was told this by Frederica and Robin that she needed to give this kid back or the authorities would get involved. Then Nash said Billy offered somebody in Tabby's family $10,000 for a baby they didn't want. And the notes said that eventually unfortunately, this child got beat to death by the dad. She said Billy would always say crazy and outlandish stuff. So then Nash said, were there any other children Billy offered to buy? And she said no. Eric said the courtroom started laughing. So Nash talks about the fake purebred dogs, and they get into this. Angela said she remembers that 2 dogs specifically she sold that weren't purebred. And so Nash says you told people the mother and father were on site. They could come see them. And he asked, how much did you pay for the ones at like the dog pound or the puppy mill? And she said, maybe 20 to 30 bucks. So Nash mentions you would sell them for over 1,500. Angela denied that. She said these dogs weren't puppies. They were older dogs. Eric said he thought she heard her say something about she had to get them shots, I guess maybe justifying some of the markup on the dogs. It's still hard for them to hear her sometimes in court, by the way. And, they're rocking it though. But she did admit she marked the dogs up. And Nash asked if it bothered her that she was frauding people out. And she said it did sometimes. Nash also asked if she ever dyed the dog's fur to match the parrots. And she said, no, she did not. He asked about her pocket doodles. And she said they're a smaller version of doodles. And he again said, you misrepresented what they were. And she said, no. She said Billy wasn't living there when she was selling the dogs. And I think she expressed that as the boys got older, she felt bad that they had to support her, I guess, in a way. That's sort of what I gathered. Billy, let's see. Nash asked if after the murder of Hannah Mae, if her and Jake kind of came up with a scheme to profit. Angela says no. And so Nash hands her the GoFundMe. And Angela said it wasn't a scheme because everybody was setting up those types of accounts. Nash says everybody's ripping people off for puppies, so that's okay. Eric said the courtroom just erupted in laughter. So he had her read the entire GoFundMe listing. We read it a few episodes ago. And Nash says, but you did this for a tragedy you created. And Angela said yes. They had asked for a goal of $20,000 in donations for attorney fees and for money to care for Suds. But Angela denies writing it. She says she doesn't remember writing that. Nash asks if there's a reason she can't remember, and Angela says, I can't remember everything. Nash asks if she remembers at one point wanting to steal a truck full of diapers with someone, and she doesn't remember. He goes into those Rocky boots that they stole and they both were arrested for. She was actually indicted for felony possession of stolen goods for stealing a trailer full of those boots. She also created a fake receipt for the books. And we know she did that as well with some house items before they burned the house down to turn over to the insurance company to be reimbursed for things that were packed away safely. Billy told her that he bought the boots off somebody. And she said, even though it was charged as a felony, it was dropped to a misdemeanor and she got probation. She said before that she didn't have any charges, apparently. They stole things from Chillicothe. Let me know if I said that right. And she got a charge there too. This was I believe the note said a tampering with evidence charge, and she pled in that case. Nash asks about the thefts involving hot tubs. She says she doesn't remember that, but they did have one at the house. And Nash asked if that was stolen, and she said yes. He asked about her involvement in that theft, and she said she used it after he set it up on the porch, and that was her involvement in the theft. So Nash talks about when Tabby brought her second child over. Remember, Angela held the baby, went out of the room. Tabby was suspicious the baby had been drugged. So Nash flat out asks her, apparently, why did you give that baby a Xanax? And Angela's like, I did not. Angela says she knows the baby had it in its system at the hospital. So she threw Hannah Mae under the bus a little bit yesterday. I don't know why, she would want to do that, but she did. She said Hannah Mae would help monitor Facebook accounts when she lived there. And Nash said that Hannah Mae was good at getting into people's Facebook's account. And Angela said, yes, she would tell Angela what she saw or maybe show her. Look, I'm going to say this. When you're living with a family like this, you remember Tabby said sometimes it was a competition between her and Hannah Mae to be the one on Angela's good side. I don't fault Hannah Mae for doing what she felt she needed to do to keep things on an even keel or even be seen as a benefit to that family. She was very young. I don't think this is anything explosive. I think she was just trying to peacefully exist in that house and seem useful. They would go through Tabby's Facebook messages. She said that she saw a lot of things on her Facebook that concerned her about Vine. She also saw confirmation that Tabby was sexually abused. She took screenshots in case there was a reason George had to go back to court with her. Also, she admits that she acquired people's personal information through Messenger. Now, get this, y'all. She had a password book that she kept that had other people's passwords in it. And boy, Nash busts out some exhibits. Angela said this wasn't hidden. She said when they lived at her dad's house, it was kept on a corner desk. And in direct, she talked about Beth and specifically the password book and said something about Beth going through her stuff. And again, she said this was out in the open. It's not like she was hiding it. And Nash asks why. She had George's plentyoffish.com account and password on there. By the way, Plenty of Fish, I think, is a Christian dating site where you can meet people that share your same beliefs. And she said they kept all the passwords in one place in case somebody forgot, that it would be written down and they could refer to that. Nash also mentioned she had Jake's iTunes password, George's PayPal password, which she said he gave to her, George's Facebook account, which he gave. And Angela said, oh, all of mine were in there too, as if it sort of makes up for the fact that she's got everybody's stuff in there. Also, she had the numbers and security code of a Visa card that belonged to Frederica Wagner. He asked why that was in there, and she said at one point, Frederica wanted to get something for Suds, or she had bought something for Suds, and Frederica gave her the money back. So Nash asked, why did you keep that number? And Angela said, it's not like I'm going to use her card without asking. And that kind of ended that. She also had customer numbers and passwords for Tabby in there. She said, again, it was put in there in case Tabby forgot and she could go back and look. So Nash talks about the night Tabby left for good. She said Tabby was having the episode where she was banging on the walls and screaming. This had happened before. And Nash asked Angela, what were you inside while this was happening? And Angela said she doesn't know what started it, but yeah. So she mentions Tabby yelling for Angela to give her Vine. Angela said she would have given her son, but only if she calmed down. When she went outside, Angela said Tabby was stomping off. They did go after her. She said Tabby went out into the dark yard. She couldn't see where she went. Eventually, Tabby left and George and Jake found her. She says Hannah Mae went with her to the truck stop, her meaning Angela, and they had the kids in the car. She was asked so apparently Nash asked her, do you remember telling George you should have just ran over her? And Angela said, no. Hannah Mae told me I should have ran over her with her car. So I don't know if I believe that, y'all. I think it's easy to put some incriminating stuff up, on somebody who's not here to defend themselves. But we'll never know because Hannah Mae is not here to tell her side. So I take that with big fat grain of salt. Nash asked about if she ever saw Tabby push Vine's hand down into the hot food. And Angela said she didn't see it, but Tabby actually told her about it. So she had warmed up some vegetables, and she said Vine liked to help cook. He would like to help stir things and just be involved. And she said that she didn't see it, but Tabby admitted that she did. And she warmed up these vegetables, and they just got too warm. So he tried to reach in to get some vegetables out, and she said, no, it's too hot. Apparently, Vine tried again, and Tabby told him no and pushed his hand in the hot food and held it there for a few seconds to show him it was hot. This is all according to Angela, so credibility is in question. She said she didn't think Tabby would be able to care for Vine on her own, but with help she could. She said Billy would go to Mexico, and at one point, Chris Sr. and Billy went to Arizona to go gambling. Nash brought up, if you remember, in the car with BCI at Kroger, Billy talked about him and Chris had a dream of going to Belize and laying on a beach and playing with strippers or something. And so Nash asked her about that. Billy told her he was going to move to Belize with Chris Sr. Angela said she didn't know the reason. She really didn't care because ultimately she didn't believe him. So Nash asks about Billy having a relationship with someone named Vance. This had something to do with getting marijuana from Mexico. They couldn't hear very well in the courtroom. Nash asks if they went to Florida to get prescription medications for trafficking and mentions that on one occasion they took George and Billy with them, but Angela said they went on vacation while they were down there getting drugs for trafficking. So little family time in between the felonies. They talk about when Tabby and Angela had some issues while doing yard work. This was also hard to hear for Eric and Jamie, but they were apparently pulling some weeds. She doesn't remember what was said that day, but apparently Tabby got upset with Angela and threw some kind of a box at her. It cut Angela's ankle. She said she didn't go to the hospital, and she said they made up later. So she said Tabby told her she was bipolar and was violated as a child. She was supposed to be on medication. Angela said she wasn't taking them. Angela did admit that she was the one who called Highway Patrol and told them that Tabby had the drugs in her car. If you remember, Tabby was pulled over. She told them they could search the car, and the officer didn't even take her up on that. She also remembers being the one to suggest that initially when they started talking about the murders, that they just turn in Chris Sr. for drugs, and that might make the whole situation a little easier if he were out of the picture. Then Nash moves on to talk about her and Hannah Mae being close, and he asks about them upstairs. We've heard this before. She said if Hannah Mae couldn't sleep or whatever, or if Angela was doing something while Vine was asleep, she would text Angela and say, hey, Mom, are you awake? So Angela said they would sit at the top of the stairs and talk about whatever they talked about. And she said we would bond. And she said they would also go through Facebook sitting up there. And she said they would laugh. And Nash said Hannah Mae was like a daughter to you. And Angela very apparently matter-of-factly said, yes, she was. If I was Nash, I would have said, but she agreed to have her killed. This morning, Nash asked if she had a son she favored more than George, or like more at George's expense. And she said she did not have a favorite son and said it's extremely hard for her to be in that witness chair and testifying against him. She said it rips her heart out, and she loves both her boys, Jake and George, the same. So here's the big question for me, and this is something I was thinking about last night too. He asked, why didn't you seek medical care when you had concerns that maybe something was happening with Suds? And she said she doesn't know why they didn't take her to a doctor. And you think about it, if they were so paranoid and if it were a valid accusation, which I really don't believe it was in my heart, taking her to a doctor and getting proof of that would have been game over, essentially. And problem solved. They probably could have gotten custody of Suds, and everybody lives. And then they still hold that upper hand if they get full custody of her due to something like that. But I think the reason maybe she didn't take her to the doctor is because there was really no reason. I think all this originated with them and their paranoia, and it became 8 people murdered. So Angela also claims that message that Hannah Mae put on Messenger saying that they would have to kill her before she would sign Suds over. According to Angela, that message had nothing to do with the plan to murder Hannah Mae or her family. Hogwash, liabetes, y'all. So we're caught up. This is everything. Sorry for the delay. I'll try to get the rest of it out this afternoon before I take off. And so thanks for being patient. We'll see you later today and hope you have a good afternoon.